I never thought I'd be sued by the one person I swore to protect. But now I'm sitting across from my own brother's lawyer, and all I can hear in my head is the sound of the ventilator from his ICU room. My name is Adam, I'm 37, and I used to think I was the smartest guy in the room. I'm the older brother. The responsible one. The one who should have known better. My little brother Kyle was born with spina bifida, and has been paralyzed from the waist down since birth. Growing up, I used to carry him everywhere, in my back, on my shoulders, even once through a blizzard when our wheelchair-accessible van broke down. I loved him. I still love him. But love doesn't cancel out what I did. Kyle got a hefty settlement when he turned 18. Our parents had filed a malpractice lawsuit on his behalf years ago against the hospital for a birth injury, and after a long, painful legal battle, he was awarded $850,000. It was put in a special trust account. My parents made it crystal clear. That money was to support Kyle only for housing, medical care, and accessibility for the rest of his life. I even signed as the backup trustee in case anything ever happened to them, which of course it eventually did. Last year, both our parents died in a car accident. It was brutal and unexpected. Kyle nearly lost his mind with grief, and I went numb. There was the funeral, the estate, the trust. One was drowning in paperwork and pain. But underneath it all, something else was growing too. An idea. I had been working a soulless sales job for over a decade, and I hated every second of it. But I always dreamed of starting my own business, a tech consultancy, specifically helping companies scale securely. I had contacts, experience, and even a skeleton team willing to go all in. What I didn't have: capital. And then I looked at Kyle's trust account. I told myself it was a loan. I even said it out loud like some kind of spell. Just a loan. I'll pay it back with interest. I convinced myself Kyle wouldn't even notice, especially since the money would still technically be in the trust account. I'd just be temporarily redirecting it. No one would get hurt. In fact, Kyle would benefit too. I had it all planned. My company would take off, I'd double the money within a year, and I'd put it all back plus a bonus to thank him. But of course that's not what happened. I pulled $250,000 from the trust. Not all at once, but over a few weeks, disguised as medical renovations and therapy costs. I had access. I had the documents. It was easy. First, things were promising. We landed a decent-sized client in month 2. My heart soared. I remember thinking, this is it. This is the comeback story. I even started picking out a new wheelchair-accessible van for Kyle, thinking I'd surprise him with it when everything paid off. Then, like a slow-moving car crash, everything started falling apart. The client backed out after their funding collapsed. A second client ghosted us before signing. One of my partners dipped out and took a chunk of proprietary code with him. Lawsuits threatened. Expenses piled. I couldn't pay rent on our shared office space. I started missing payroll. And still I kept telling myself, just a few more weeks. Just one more break. I'll fix it. I started ignoring Kyle's texts. He had no idea what was going on. But he did know something was off. When his home nurse reported that the new wheelchair lift hadn't been paid for and the account had insufficient funds, Kyle called me. I didn't pick up. He called again. Then he emailed. Still nothing. I was ashamed and spiraling. Then came the stroke. Kyle collapsed in his apartment and was rushed to the ER. His blood pressure had spiked dangerously, and he'd suffered a minor stroke, thankfully one that spared his cognition, but it left his speech slurred and his left arm weakened. And worse, the medical team discovered that his insurance had lapsed. The trust had failed to cover his supplemental premiums for 3 months. All the automated payments had bounced. When I finally saw him in that hospital bed, I wanted to die. His eyes, God, I'll never forget the look he gave me. Not anger. Not sadness. Just disbelief. He didn't scream at me. He didn't curse. He asked one question. Why? I broke. I told him everything. The company, the loans, the plan, how it all crumbled. I begged for forgiveness. I promised to fix it. I even offered to sell my car and max out my personal credit cards to pay him back. Kyle didn't say a word. He turned his head and stared at the wall. 2 days later, I was served legal papers. Kyle had hired an attorney through a hospital program for disabled adults and was suing me for breach of fiduciary duty, misappropriation of funds, and negligence. It was a real lawsuit. Against me. His own brother. I went into panic mode. Called him. Emailed. Showed up at the hospital. Nothing. He refused to see me. His lawyer made it clear. Any further contact had to go through legal channels. My girlfriend, who had been tentatively supportive until then, finally packed her bags and left. She told me she couldn't be with someone who could steal from their own disabled sibling. I couldn't even argue with her. The internet got wind of it too thanks to a Reddit post by one of Kyle's nurses. Suddenly I was that guy. Comments flooded in. Human garbage. Rot in hell. Hope he goes to prison. And maybe they're right. But here's the twist: I didn't expect Kyle's lawyer. Turns out she knew our mom. They went to high school together. She told me in a surprisingly calm tone during our first hearing, "Your mother warned me once. She said if anything happened to her, I might need to protect Kyle." I thought she was being dramatic. I wish she had been. That hit me harder than the lawsuit. I never intended to hurt my brother. I truly believed I was doing something good. But intention doesn't erase consequences. And consequences have come hard and fast. I've since liquidated the remains of the company. I'm broke. I'm living in my friend's spare bedroom. And yet, none of it hurts like losing Kyle's trust. There's more to say about what Kyle wrote in his legal declaration, the letters our parents left behind, and the one final twist that may change everything, but I'll get to that next. The lawsuit became real faster than I expected. I thought it would just be a scare tactic, something to jolt me into action. But the hearing dates came, the documents were filed, and I was suddenly standing in front of a judge, sweating through my shirt collar while a courtroom full of strangers judged me for something I already couldn't forgive myself for. Kyle didn't show up to the first few hearings. His lawyer explained he was still recovering, both physically and emotionally, and being in the same room as me would cause unnecessary trauma. That phrase, unnecessary trauma, rang in my head for weeks. Every night I'd lie in bed, eyes wide open, hearing those words over and over again. I never saw myself as the kind of man who inflicted trauma, but maybe we never do until it's too late. I hired a defense attorney named Julie. She was good, smart, sharp, the kind of lawyer who could probably win a murder trial with one hand tied behind her back. But even she looked at the case file and sighed. "Adam, this isn't just a lawsuit. It's a betrayal case. The law doesn't like when trustees mess with protected funds, especially when the beneficiary is disabled and incapacitated." I asked her quietly, "Do I have any chance?" She looked me dead in the eye and said, "Not unless you can prove you acted in Kyle's best interest. Not yours. That's the difference between a mistake and a crime." From that day on, I started gathering every receipt, every email, every scrap of communication that could show I had intended to help Kyle, not rob him. I even found the prototype designs of the new wheelchair I was hoping to help fund for him. Julie told me it was nice, but wouldn't be enough. Intent is not defense. Results matter more in civil court. That's when I did something I hadn't done in months. I wrote Kyle a letter. It was 5 pages long. I poured everything into it. I wrote about how scared I was after Mom and Dad died, how I felt like I had to be the man of the family, and how my need to prove I was capable got tangled with my desire to do something big. I told him that I knew I didn't deserve forgiveness, but I begged him to just talk to Menet as a plaintiff, not as a legal opponent, but as his brother. I sent it through his lawyer. I didn't expect a response. 2 weeks later I got one. Not from Kyle but from our aunt. Aunt Margaret. I hadn't spoken to her in years. She was our mother's estranged sister, and she had always been strange, religious, judgmental, reclusive. But in the envelope she sent was a copy of a letter Mom had written before her death, and apparently entrusted to Aunt Margaret just in case anything ever happened to both her and Dad. The letter was addressed to Kyle and me. It wasn't long, just a page and a half, but it ripped me apart in a way nothing else had. Mom wrote, "If you're reading this, it means we're gone, and my worst fear has come true. You're both alone. But you still have each other. Kyle, your brother has always protected you. And Adam, your brother has always believed in you. Please don't let grief or pride destroy what love built. Money can be replaced. Time can't. Whatever happens, choose forgiveness, not bitterness. You are both all the family the other one has left." I read that letter 20 times in a row. Then I sat on the floor of my friend's spare room and cried for the first time in months. Something in me shifted that night. Not in a self-pitying way, but in a clarifying way. I realized I'd been trying to win the lawsuit like it was a game. But it wasn't. It was about Kyle. About what I'd taken from him, not just money but stability, safety, trust. I knew then I had to stop fighting for my innocence and start fighting for his healing. The next morning, I made a decision that Julie nearly choked on her coffee over. I told her I wanted to settle. She looked up sharply. "You want to settle for the full amount?" "No," I said. "I want to overpay." I had just received a small buyout offer for what remained of my startup software, about $90,000. I told Julie to move the full amount to Kyle's trust, and to include a signed declaration from me admitting fault, waiving my role as trustee, and giving Kyle full control of any future estate proceeds from our parents. Julie said quietly, "This isn't going to save your reputation, Adam." I nodded. "It's not about me anymore." And then came the twist I never saw coming. Kyle agreed to meet. We met in a small private hospital conference room. He was in a wheelchair, thinner than I remembered, his left arm still in a sling, but his eyes were clear and sharp. When I walked in, I was shaking so badly I thought I might throw up. He didn't speak for the first 5 minutes. Just looked at me. I sat in silence, heart pounding, staring at the table. Then he said, slowly but clearly, "Do you even know what you took from me?" I looked up and said honestly, "Everything." He exhaled sharply. "Not the money, Adam. The safety net. The one thing Mom and Dad left me to not have to worry about. You took that. You made me afraid to go to sleep. Afraid to trust anyone." I felt tears sting my eyes. "I know. I'm sorry." He was quiet again, then he pulled out a folder. Inside were his letters. 3 of them. One to me, one to the court, and one to himself. He handed me mine. I opened it, hands trembling. It read, "Dear Adam, I don't forgive you yet, but I don't want to hate you either. I understand fear. I understand desperation. I've lived with both every day. But you need to know something. Mom told me once that you would always try to carry the weight of the world. That sometimes you'd collapse under it. Maybe that's what happened. I want you to get help. Real help. Not for me. For yourself. If you do that, and if you mean what you said about making it right, then maybe someday we can be brothers again." That letter broke something open in me. That same day, I enrolled in financial counseling. I also signed up for therapy, weekly sessions. I even joined a local support group for family members of disabled adults, many of whom admitted to similar moments of burnout, fear, even unethical decisions. It didn't excuse what I did, but it helped me understand why I'd failed and how not to fail again. Kyle dropped the lawsuit 2 weeks later. He asked for a new trustee to be appointed, an outside fiduciary with legal oversight. I agreed. I wasn't angry. I was relieved. For the first time in months, I slept without dreams of sirens or courtroom glares. But the internet didn't forget. The Reddit thread was still active, still brutal. People dissected my court statement, mocked my letter to Kyle, even tracked down photos from my failed startup. I became a meme for a while. Trust fund thief bro. Silicon Valley scumbag. I didn't try to defend myself online. There was no point. They didn't know the whole story, and they weren't entitled to it. But Kyle? He knew. He knows. We talk now. Not often. But it's a start. We watch a movie together every other Sunday over Zoom. It's not forgiveness, but it's something. Last week, he told me about a project he's working on, developing an app to help disabled people track insurance coverage, accessible housing opportunities, and legal rights. He wants to use some of the settlement funds to back it. He paused, then asked me, "Do you want to help?" As a volunteer. No money. Just time. I said yes before he even finished the sentence. And maybe, just maybe, that's where redemption begins. Volunteering with Kyle on his app was humbling. I didn't come in expecting hugs or high fives. I knew better. Kyle made it clear this wasn't about healing us, this was about doing something useful, something bigger than either of us. He had a small team. 2 other developers, one of whom was in a wheelchair like him, and a paralegal named Bria who specialized in disability rights. They were good, passionate, focused. They met in the afternoons over Zoom or at the Community Resource Center downtown, and for the first few weeks I mostly listened. I didn't say much. Didn't offer opinions. Just took notes, wrote code when asked, and kept my head down. The weirdest part? Kyle treated me like any other team member. He didn't smile. He didn't joke. But he gave me tasks, answered my questions, even sent late-night emails like, "Recheck that accessibility audit on the claims tracking module. But in contrast is failing WCAG standards." That one made me tear up. Not because of what he said, but because he trusted me enough to critique my work like anyone else's. No more, no less. Week by week, I began to feel something unfamiliar, grounded. I wasn't chasing some tech fantasy, trying to impress investors or go viral. I was helping build a tool that might keep someone like Kyle from ever feeling as helpless as he had after I gutted his safety net. One day, Bria pulled me aside after a team meeting. She was short, blunt, and intimidatingly smart. The kind of woman who could eviscerate someone with a single raised eyebrow. "Adam," she said, "can I ask you something without you getting defensive?" "Sure," I said, already bracing myself. "Why'd you really take the money?" I blinked. "I told Kyle. I told the court. It was." "No," she cut in. "I mean deeper than that. Everybody's desperate. Everybody thinks they have a good reason. But most people don't steal from family. So what was your crack point?" I sat there stunned. No one had asked me that, not like that. Not even my therapist. And before I could filter myself, I answered. "Because I was terrified," I said. "Not just of failing, but of being ordinary. I thought if I didn't build something huge, if I didn't become someone big, then I was nothing. And that would mean Mom and Dad died for nothing, that I had no value. So I took the shortcut. I told myself it was for Kyle, but it wasn't. It was for me." Bria was quiet. She didn't nod, didn't respond with sympathy. Just looked at me for a long moment. Then she said, "Okay. Good. You should say that out loud more often." She walked away, leaving me sitting there with that truth buzzing in my chest like a fresh wound. Kyle overheard, I think. He didn't say anything, but that evening, he added me to the Slack channel he used for direct planning conversations. Until then, I had only been in the general workspace. This one had design blueprints, investor pitch drafts, and mock-ups for public rollouts. It wasn't trust exactly, but it was inclusion. And for me, it meant everything. 2 months later, things came full circle in a way I couldn't have predicted. Kyle's app called Accessible was in beta testing, and the community feedback was incredible. Users were already using it to avoid insurance lapses and appeal denials. A local nonprofit offered seed funding. A journalist from an advocacy blog picked up the story. It was becoming real. And that's when I got the call. Julie, my old lawyer, reached out. "You're going to want to sit down," she said. A class action lawsuit had been filed against the original hospital where Kyle was born. A group of families, after seeing Kyle's original case, began investigating birth injuries that occurred at that same hospital in the early 1990s. Turns out, there were multiple cases of mismanaged deliveries resulting in spinal trauma. The hospital had buried the data. Now, a legal avalanche was building, and Kyle's case, his old case, was at the heart of it. "They want to interview Kyle for testimony," Julie said. "But there's more. A media firm wants to option a documentary, possibly a book deal. And you, Adam, are in the story. Front and center." I felt like the ground shifted beneath me. I asked, "How much of the story?" "All of it," she replied. "Kyle hasn't agreed yet. But if he does, you'll be named." That night, I sat with the possibility that everything I'd been trying to rebuild might get washed away by a second wave of public shame. Not because Kyle was vindictive, but because the truth was important. I called him. I hadn't called in months. We always emailed or messaged. But this time I needed to hear his voice. He answered after 3 rings. "Yeah. I heard about the lawsuit," I said. "And the media stuff. I just wanted to say, if you want to tell the full story, you should. Even if I come out looking like a villain again." There was silence. Then he said, "I haven't decided." "I know," I said. "But I'm okay if you do. Just, maybe let me tell my part too. Not to defend myself. Just to say what happened. Honestly. All of it." Another pause. Then Kyle said, "Would you do the interview?" With me. My breath caught. What? If I do it, he said slowly, I want you there. Not as a redemption arc. Just as the person who was there. The one who failed. And the one who stayed. My throat tightened. I'd be honored. The interview happened 2 weeks later in a small studio rented by the documentary team. Bright lights. 2 chairs. A backdrop of gray fabric and quiet hum of cameras. Kyle and I sat side by side. They asked him everything: his condition, his childhood, the lawsuit, the betrayal. He spoke clearly, calmly, and without bitterness. When they turned to me, I expected them to go easy. They didn't. Why should anyone believe you've changed? I don't expect them to, I said. But Kyle saw something worth keeping. And I want to live up to that. Do you think you deserve forgiveness? No, I answered. But I hope I can earn his trust again. That's all I can ask. After the interview, we sat in the parking lot in silence for a while. Then Kyle looked over and said something that will never leave me. You know, Mom always used to say that real family doesn't show up when you're at your best. They show up when you're broken. I swallowed hard. Do you think I'm family again? He didn't answer. But he reached over and gripped my hand. That was enough. Fast forward 6 months. The documentary aired. It went viral in advocacy circles. Donations to Accessible skyrocketed. Kyle became a sought-after speaker at disability conferences. And me? I stayed in the background coding updates, managing infrastructure, keeping my head down. I still get hate online sometimes. People still send messages calling me a thief, a snake, a liar. And I don't blame them. They only know the headline. But Kyle knows the whole story. And sometimes when he introduces me in meetings, he says, "This is Adam. He's our lead developer. And my brother." He never says more than that. He doesn't have to. Because in those few words I hear everything. The hurt, the healing, and the fragile thread of hope that connects us still. The launch day of Accessible felt like watching Kyle get the life he was always owed but never dared to imagine. The event was held in the atrium of a tech accessibility conference in Chicago. There were banners, screens looping demo videos, volunteers in branded t-shirts, and a buzzing crowd of journalists, developers, and people in wheelchairs who had been beta users and were now full-blown evangelists. Kyle rolled up on stage, calm, precise, a speaker transformed from the soft-spoken, pain-numbed brother I once found in that hospital bed. And when he introduced the app, not as a product but as a roadmap to freedom, the applause shook the room. I stayed in the back half on purpose. I didn't want the spotlight. I didn't deserve it. But then Kyle called me up. "Before I close," he said into the mic, "I want to bring up someone who built more than code here. Someone who broke my heart once, and who's spent every day since then showing me what it means to rebuild something better. My brother Adam." People clapped. Some slow, some hesitant, but they clapped. I walked to the stage, heart in my throat, eyes stinging. I didn't have a speech prepared. But Kyle handed me the mic and I found the words. "I stole something once," I said. "Not just money but peace, safety, trust. And I thought I could fix it by paying it back. But I couldn't. Because some things need more than repayment. They need presence. So I stayed. I kept showing up. And this app, this dream, it's Kyle's. But he let me be part of it. And I'm grateful every day." After the event, an older man came up to us. White hair, a cane, a soft smile. "You boys don't remember me," he said. "But I was your parents' neighbor when you were little. Used to mow their lawn for free after your dad got sick. Your mom, she always talked about how proud she was of both of you. Even when you argued. Even when you broke things. She always said, 'Those two'll find their way back.'" Kyle smiled and I did too. And for the first time in years, I felt something like peace settle in my chest. The next few months flew by. Accessible surpassed 100,000 users. Partnerships formed with disability advocacy groups and even a few insurance companies. Kyle became the face of something real. And I, still coding from my quiet desk in a co-working space, felt more grounded than I ever did chasing angel investors or six-figure contracts. Then came the letter. It was mailed to Kyle but addressed to both of us. The return address said St. Helena Women's Correctional Facility. I blinked. Inside was a single page, handwritten in sharp, narrow cursive. The name at the bottom made my skin prickle. Sharon Keller. Our biological grandmother. The one Mom never spoke of. The one we'd thought had died years ago. According to the letter, she had been arrested in the 1980s for a series of fraud schemes targeting disability checks and benefits. She'd spent most of her life in and out of prison. Kyle and I sat together at the kitchen table in his apartment, rereading the letter. It said, "I know you don't know me, but I know you. Your mother was my daughter, even though I was never fit to raise her. When I heard about what you two were building, something that protects the vulnerable instead of exploiting them, I wept. Because it means somewhere along the way the chain broke. The cycle stopped. And that matters. Even if I was never part of it. Thank you both. You changed something more than you know." Kyle folded the letter slowly. His expression was unreadable. "You okay?" I asked. He nodded. "Yeah. Just weird, I guess. Knowing where we come from. And how far we've come." "Maybe that's the point," I said. "That we keep coming." A year passed. We made mistakes. Pushed bad code. Got overwhelmed. Argued. But we kept showing up. Kept growing. I got a stable apartment again. Started dating someone named a quiet graphic designer named Lauren, who asked about Kyle on our third date instead of pretending he didn't exist. She told me, "Anyone who goes through hell and still walks toward the fire to fix it has someone I can trust." Kyle met her on Zoom once. They both like sarcasm and indie horror films. It was awkward. Then sweet. Then normal. That's the word that began creeping back into my life. Normal. Not perfect. Not easy. But honest. Whole. Earned. And then last month Kyle did something I never expected. He asked me to come with him to Mom and Dad's grave. We hadn't gone together since the funeral. He had gone alone a few times, and I'd visited on my own once during the worst of the lawsuit. But together? Never. We stood in silence at the double headstone. The breeze was gentle. The cemetery was quiet. Then Kyle reached into his backpack and pulled out a laminated flyer. The accessible mission statement. He laid it at the base of the headstone. Smoothed it out with his good hand. Then he said softly, "We kept the promise, Mom." I bit my lip hard, trying not to cry. Kyle looked over at me. "And we're not done yet. You know, people say trust is like glass. Once it's broken, it's never the same. But I think maybe trust is more like a tree. It gets cut, stormed, split by lightning. But if the roots go deep enough, if you keep tending to it, new branches grow. Twisted maybe. Scarred. But alive. Kyle and I will never be the same as before. But maybe we're something better. Not two perfect brothers. Just two men who broke apart and chose to build again. Together.